Evening and welcome to the Nurturing Coach channel. Thank you for being here for my live this evening. Today I wanted to talk about, am I the narcissist? And I don't necessarily mean am I the narcissist. It's the fact that in general what happens in parental alienation cases is that, one, we can get called the narcissist, we get called crazy, we get called all of the names under the sun. And being the type of person that we are, we take that on board and we do start to question ourselves. So I wanted to explore that a little bit and sort of alleviate some of your fears and validate your feelings and how things may present. I'm just going to sort out the chat, so just give me 1 second. It should, right, okay, it's saying it's connected. So if you want to say hi, be great to hear from you. I'll give it a couple more minutes just see if anyone else joins us. If not, we'll get cracking. I hope you've all had a good weekend. It is 8 o'clock. Hi Lacey. Hi Sports Tube. I'm sorry if I've got that wrong. Sports Tube. Okay, so I'm going to get started. Like I said, we get called a lot of things. When you've been in a relationship with a narcissist, they project. We know that. That's one of the elements, is that they will project their own behaviours onto you. And so they will call you a narcissist. They will say that you've got bipolar. They will say that you're crazy, that you're abusive, that you're aggressive. And part of this forms a smear campaign, because they want to make you look like the awful person. Hi Andrew. They want to make you look like the awful person to cover up their own inadequacy, so they put all the bad things onto you. But I think that as empathetic people, we take that personally. We do question ourselves sometimes, and so even though logically we know that they're projecting, we're also self-aware enough to recognise that it's worth having a look at. So I think one of the first things, we all know the narcissist behaviour. We know that they gaslight, they project, they manipulate, they lie, they will use and abuse anyone to achieve their own status. But one of the main things that they struggle with is their own identity, is knowing who they are, being able to be self-reflected. So at the risk of kind of making this the shortest live stream ever, the fact that you ask, am I a narcissist, probably means that you're not, because a narcissist would never ask that question. They would just assume that you're in the wrong. And yeah, and it says, I often think I do a lot of things that a narc would do. And I think that when you're in a parental alienation case, those behaviours can become blurred. And there's a few reasons for that. And that's kind of what I wanted to go through. So we've talked about projection and how they will put a lot of that onto you. But you've also got to remember that if you've been in a relationship with someone long enough to have children, hi Carol, you have probably learnt a lot of behaviours. You've been conditioned to behave in certain ways. And so when the relationship ends, you may still have some of those behaviours instilled within you. It takes a while to break that habit. And one of those behaviours, it could be lying. I know from my own experience that I became someone I didn't recognise, but it was because I needed to survive. And so when we sometimes maybe do lie, or we say something that could be deemed as being manipulative, we're doing it from a survival point of view at that moment in time, but that's not our character. And this is the important definition to make, is that narcissists always have these characteristics. We might have them at certain times, just because we have to survive. So we may do those things. We may behave in ways that aren't necessarily our own behaviours, but we would do them because we're just trying to survive. And certainly in relationships with the narcissist, we can definitely do that, and we can sometimes find we carry that forward. Also, Andrew says about playing the game to get by. I think that in parental alienation cases, you do feel a little bit like you have to play them at their own game. But that doesn't make you a narcissist, because it's a temporary set of behaviours, in the same way as someone crying over something horrible that's happened doesn't make them an emotional wreck. That it's a situational reaction, and that's how you behave. But when you're living that, when you're 24/7, you're dealing with trying to co-parent, it becomes more than situational. And this is kind of where the codependency, co-narcissism, hi Arlene, that's where that comes in, is that your behaviours become more of your character the longer the situation goes on. But it's your motivation. And this is the difference between yourself and a narcissist. A narcissist's motivation, and this comes down to their attachment style. The narcissist's motivation is to, at all costs, protect that sense of self-inadequacy. They do not want anyone to see that they are as inadequate as they feel they are. So they project all of that onto you. That's why they tell everyone you're the abuser, because that way they are blameless. So they will say all of those things to protect their own. Whereas when you might do something narcissistic, you're doing it with a very different motivation. And so that is that is kind of what would say that you weren't the narcissist, because your motivation is completely different. So has anyone got any questions at that point? I think with parental alienation as well, when you do play the victim, I think Andrew is right, that because you have been abused and you're trying to protect the kids, if you remember the triangle that we talk about, you kind of stay within that, and a narcissist will always act the victim or the hero, and all of a sudden you find yourself in that role, and it doesn't come comfortable to most people. Most of us don't want to be seen as that, or it's actually it feels like a bit of a derogatory term. And so when you find yourself in that role, it feels uncomfortable. And when you find yourself talking about the abuse, when other people might view it as a lie, they could potentially see you as the narcissist. And so it's that external opinion as well that goes into this. Do other people think that you're the narcissist in this? And I think in parental alienation cases, that is often what does happen, is that the victim or the target, as a few of you are saying, the target can become seen as the problem, can become seen as the narcissist, because actually when you describe both sides of the coin, they look very similar. I work with both. I work with men and women, and I only get one side of the story. And I always try and look at it from both angles, because I like to see how everything lies. And I talked about this last week in Bias, that actually reframing is a really good way of looking at a case. So say, for example, I know one of your cases, and you have been alienated from your child's life for X amount of time, and they've abused you all along, they're now abusing the children, they have done all that. If I then went to the other parent and asked them, they would probably tell me the exact same story. They would tell me that they've been with you for years, they've tried to alienate the kids, they've abused them. And so that's where the lines get blurred, is because people don't then know. They don't know who's telling the truth, who isn't telling the truth, who is the one with the mental health problems here. And this is why it's so important that we have much more in-depth assessments done, because we can all act. We can all act as the victim, and we can all act as the abuser. And that isn't comfortable for people to say, but you can. It's quite easy to slip into that role, and you may think that you're being protective, but sometimes you can overstep those lines. And so self-awareness and longer assessment processing is really important. Let me just have a read of the comments. I'll try to unmute your phone. Yes, that is the trouble, Arlene. Sometimes people can have that natural, and I get the sympathy. I get that. I think when we know how narcissistic children are brought up, then we can have that sympathy for them. But actually, you make a choice. We all make a choice. There's lots of people who've had terrible childhoods who don't grow up to be narcissists and treat other people terribly. I agree. It's important not to stay in a victim mentality. It's a place we've been, but not a place to stay. We're all survivors. My hat is off to anyone who breaks free from the news. You're a victim until you are believed. Until then, you are a victim. I think the term victim means different things to different people. And I agree that the term victim is very much that you are still in that place. You are still having that, and mentally you're still there. Once you make that conscious decision that I'm not going to be like that, and until you're believed, you're a victim. Yeah, but sometimes it's also about your own mental state. It is, you can say to yourself, I'm not going to accept this anymore. I'm not prepared to play that role of victim. I'm going to stand out from that. And that's a really difficult thing to do. But to me, you taking yourself out of the victim role is really powerful. And ultimately, the terminology we use is personal. Some people like survivor, some people like victim, some people will use another word. Codependent is used quite a lot. Co-narcissist is another one. There's lots of different terminology that can be used to describe being in a relationship with a narcissist, and it's personal. It's entirely up to you what you use. And I suppose terminology wise as well, we're also looking at, when we say someone is a narcissist, we're judging them on how they've made us feel, on the behaviours that we've witnessed, and so they won't necessarily have a diagnosis. So we're not saying they're a diagnosed NPD. What we're saying is they've behaved as a narcissist. They've displayed narcissistic traits. Let me just have a read again. Yeah, Andrew. The narcissist is always trying to get one over. The narcissist is always trying to regain control of the situation. They believe that they are far more important, that their wishes and feelings are the only ones that count. Yours don't count, the kids don't count, only theirs count. Arlene says, I divorced my ex 35 years ago, but children now grown don't like to talk about it. And that's understandable. Many people want to just move past it and forget about it, but you have to deal with it at some point. And if they found a way to work through it, then great. If not, I hope that they've got the support when they need to. When they're not gaslight judges and police to keep the abuse up, you're still a victim. Yeah. Yeah, and but it's, again, like I say, the victim in the mentality of that. And in parental alienation cases, it's the children that are ultimately the victims, isn't it? Let's be honest. It's the children that are victims, because we live in a society whereby we focus on children and vulnerable people. So in your role, you're in the triangle, you're the protector. They're the victim, the narcissist is the abuser, and you are the protector. But the narcissist shows it the other way. They're the protector and you're the abuser. But the child is always the victim in this, because they're the ones that are being manipulated. They're the ones who are being psychologically brainwashed and tortured into thinking certain ways, into believing that the person that they loved wasn't is a different person, even though they don't remember them that way. They remember them as being loving. So, but like I say, it is down to personal preference. Some people don't mind using the term victim. Some people are against it, and that's entirely up to you. And the linear process, it's not a linear process, is it? It's up and down and changes on a daily basis. So you use whatever term you are comfortable with. Yeah, Lacey, it's hard. Ultimately, it's down to actions. And I think, interestingly enough, when you've been in a relationship with a narcissist, what happens psychologically is that what the non-narcissist kind of morphs into the narcissist, not in as much as they understand and want to be like them. What happens is, because they've got so used to their wishes and feelings and their personality and everything not being validated, they kind of just give up. So essentially only one psychological person is available, and that is the narcissist. So the narcissist is the primary brain essentially for the family, that everything the narcissist thinks, says, does, that's what the family is. And so your children may have seen you behave in ways, and the narc is very clever at erasing what they've done and just leaving your behavior. That they're the sort of person that'll, you two stand and knock on the door and they run off and leave you standing there, so you get the blame. That's what a narcissist does. And so your kids may remember only your behaviour, which was in response to theirs, and like I say, may have been for survival. You've given up on voicing your own wishes and feelings and opinions because they were never listened to anyway. So you became codependent or co-narcissistic. And so the kids may just see that. The kids may just have been, their memories have been manipulated so that they only remember. But your long-term behaviours are what will stand out for you. Everyone is a victim. There's no win-win at all when you've been in a relationship with a narcissist and there's kids involved. I mean, even for those that don't have children with the narcissist, you still walk away different. You're never the same again. And a lot of people that are better, but it takes a while to get there. But for the children, it's a very difficult situation for them, because you love your parents regardless of who they are. You still love them. They will love them because that's part of us. That's a huge part of who we are. Our identity is wrapped up in our parents. And so they're going to love them, but they're not going to get that back. They're not going to get that unconditional love. They're not going to get the attunement that you have with your parents. They're not going to be able to support you and help you develop appropriately. But nevertheless, they will still love them. And so even if they never see the narc again, if you remove the narc entirely from their lives, they're left feeling rejected. They're left feeling like there's something wrong with them. Children will take all this on board. And so that's hard for them. If the narc stays in their life, then co-parenting with a narcissist is incredibly stressful, and they get put into the victim role because all the abuse gets put onto them. And so there are no winners. I did not give up, so they assaulted me with a knife. Wow. yeah, but I mean, to me, that sounds like there's a sociopathic element to your narcissist sports tube. So I'm glad that you're okay. I'm glad you survived, and I think running away was absolutely the right thing to do. I found I used to be pretty laid back about lots of things. I have to check myself all the time. They're constantly in fear of the campaign working against me. Unfortunately, that is true. You do become, and that's part of the PTSD, is that you become very hypersensitive, hypervigilant. You are constantly thinking, "Oh God, is it okay to say that?" Or will if the narcissist read that, would they take offence? Or if they got told that I'd done that, how would it cause an argument? And this is you. Even though you're no longer with them, you're still finding that you're doing those things. But again, that will get easier. It will get easier as you move out of the relationship, as you move through healing. You will realize that you can be free. You can find your voice. You can absolutely be whoever you want to say. You've got full freedom of speech. But like I say, that's part of the journey. And whilst you're still enmeshed and there's children, it's difficult to fully get to that point. I think a lot of people feel the same, Andrew, that new relationships are quite difficult. You don't necessarily trust, because first relationship is to have with yourself, is to learn to trust you again. Learn to trust that you can make good decisions, that you can keep yourself and your kids safe, and that takes time. Yeah, they are multi-faced. Mine tried to choke me and took a gun out and paid it. I said, "We're not even." Yeah, they are. Then these narcissists in general don't have that violent side because they're very much aware of how others will see them. But if they're at the point of losing control and the truth coming out, then they will act in that way. If there's a lot of violence in their life, a lot of it, then there's probably an antisocial personality disorder present, or even being they are psychopathic. But as I say, the narcissists as a whole aren't violent as such. They're emotionally violent, and so they will threaten, they will intimidate, but they will do it in secret as much as possible, and they will use violence, but only as a last resort, if they know no one will ever find out, or if it's the only way they can maintain control. But if it's something they do regularly, I would guess that they would have antisocial or psychopathic personality disorders as well. As it is possible to have a multitude. So, I mean, some of the other things that you question yourself about, and I think for me, I started to feel a lot of negativity. I'm not a negative person in general. I'm quite positive. Obviously, I have difficult times, the same as anyone else. But on the whole, I'm a happy person. I wake up and I'm in a good mood. I'm not a Mardy morning person. I'm just generally quite a happy person. But the narcissist drained me of all of that and made me a hateful person. And so on the surface, I may have looked narcissistic in some ways because I was being quite cold and quite withdrawn because I was struggling. And so to an outside person who didn't know me, who didn't know my normal personality, they may have thought, "Oh, is she the narcissist?" Because, like I said, I was acting out of character. I was withdrawn. I was negative. I wasn't empathetic. I wasn't as understanding as I usually am. And so, yeah, I could easily see why someone would make that conclusion that perhaps it's me. I guess doing these videos may think that I'm narcissistic, but I'm not doing it for myself. I'm not doing it for status. I'm doing it for other reasons. But there's lots of lots of things that you could pick out. Yeah, I think it is hard, but I think it's really important that you remember that it's not about gender as such. And obviously, when you're heterosexual, you're talking about a romantic relationship, then it is about women, or men. If you're a woman, it's men. But narcissism isn't about gender, and they want to isolate you. They want you to they want you to hate everyone. They want you to be isolated. They want you to think the worst of everyone, because if you get close to people and you have friends, then they'll warn you and they'll try and protect you and they'll try and look after you. And so they will try and isolate you by making you angry with people. Used to be an optimist, 11 years of narc abuse, put an end to that now. I know it is very scary, and I still have the same fears, but I'm trying to overcome them. I'm trying to challenge myself that I stayed away from certain places because I knew that I'd more chance of running into them. So I've avoided them. And I'm not going to do that anymore. And I'm not going to deliberately go out of my way, but I'm certainly not going to change my life to avoid someone. I'm not going to allow myself to do that. Even though there is a physical threat there, I'm not going to stop living because I've done nothing wrong, so I don't see why I should have to hide away. And I think, if there's a real physical threat, then you have to, that your safety has to come first. But try and take small steps into getting back to where you used to, or forging a different future. Might not be the one that you thought it would be, but certainly don't let them take that away from you, because that's another victory for them, and I refuse to let them win. I don't know what I'm going to show you. That's silly. Yeah, I can hear. I hear you, Andrew. I was an angry fat woman by the end of it. You do. You resort. We all have crutches. We all have crutches. Carol says that extreme arrogance came through during a high conflict divorce. Yeah, they do, and they do always do show their colours. It's just, are the right people watching when they do it? How do you get them to show it in public, and how do you get people to recognize it? Oh my word, that's crazy, Arlene. Wow. So Arlene says that the narc would go to the friends and say that she had Alzheimer's, so they wouldn't listen to her. Well, that's crazy. I think that shows that the friends are at fault as well, because just because you've got Alzheimer's doesn't mean you shouldn't be listened to. I think that's terrible. But they're very good at projecting illness, and particularly mental illness, because they want to discredit you. They want to discredit you before the relationship is over, so that when it does, they can fix all blame onto you. They can say, I did nothing wrong, I'm perfect, they were the problem, the relationship ended because of them, not me, I'm great. Because this is what they want to show to the world, that they're fantastic, they're wonderful, you were the problem. So they'll find lots of very manipulative and bizarre ways to undermine you. Wow, okay. How can you go to prison for running away with your kids if you've got parental responsibility? And this is kind of where this has come from as well, is that when parental alienation happens, they will use everything to discredit you, because like I said, ultimately what they're doing is that they want everyone to think that the reason the relationship ending was because of them, not because of you. Was because of you, sorry, not because of them. They, as far as they want everyone to know that you were the problem, not them. So they can't then have you as a good parent because that wouldn't back up what they're saying. So they have to then make out you're a terrible parent, and they have to get the kids to believe that you're a terrible parent. Because if the kids agree with them and the kids say that, then they can go, see, I told you what an awful person they were. Even the kids don't want to see them, and it's all to protect that inner self. And so yeah, they will make you out to be the bad guy, the abuser, that they have to protect the children from you. So that's why they say it. And so evidence is important. Ali says she recorded arguments, and that's the best way. Absolutely, it is the best way, is to get as much evidence. But if you have, if they're yours and you have parental responsibility, I didn't believe you could abduct them. But it is hard, and with parental alienation cases, you have that swing, and this is why it's so unhelpful to children and so damaging, is because ideally kids should have a relationship with both parents. Ideally, kids should have a relationship with both parents. When one is a narcissist, we have to, essentially they're a child abuser, they're abusive, and so therefore we have to take that into account. But what happens more often than not is the children get left with the alienator. So the children are left in an abusive environment. So you, to tip that balance and to see your children, you then have to remove them, and so you're then classed as being the danger, and so it becomes this horrible vicious cycle, and the kids just get bounced around because you're trying to protect them from the abuse, the abuser is trying to keep control, and so it is literally like ping pong, and that's not good for children. They end up developing the same attachment that led the narcissist. They have a disorganized attachment where they don't know what's going on. They can't. There's a lack of stability in that. So the emails were the worst bit. She would log into my account. See, yeah. Okay. They have no respect for privacy. Absolutely no respect for privacy. They will own your phone. They will go through your mail. They will think that they are well justified that they can do that. They will like Andrew says, they will say that they're doing it in your best interest, or that they're doing it because you deserve that, or whatever. But you're not. You're entitled to your own privacy. You can absolutely, you can have your own email. You can open your own mail. You can have your own phone. They've got no right to stop you. This is all about the control element. Oh wow. Okay. So fraud. Bush Stube says she managed to disable my SIM card before first court hearing. Got herself another in my number and saw the text from my lawyer. So she was being illegal and getting access to your information, which is fraud. So I mean, it's certainly something you could consider. But it's amazing that you have to think about all these things. One counsellor, upon speaking with my kids, said it is brainwashing. Yeah, they do. They are brainwashing. That's exactly what they do. It's that cult-like mentality of, you will do it this way. You will agree with me. And if you don't, you will be punished. And kids don't want to be punished, so they go along with it, even though they don't want to. So what the kids are left feeling is shame and guilt. Shame that they can't stand up for themselves, and guilt because they're saying horrible things about the parent and they don't want to. Even if on a conscious level they look like they're going along with it and they're being made to believe that it's their choice, subconsciously they know, and that affects how they view themselves in the long term. They don't trust themselves and they don't trust other people. I tried to get supervised court, so would it? Brilliant. That's good. I'm glad that you got full custody. It's really hard, isn't it? Andrew says that he feels like him and his 13-year-old have a isn't mum terrible club, which then makes him feel like a knob, but he's trying to support her. And I think ultimately you can support without saying anything. And as hard as it is, I would still always advocate that you don't say anything negative about the other parent. You can say, I'm really sorry that your mum made you feel like that, or I'm really sorry that you feel like that. But I would never necessarily say anything bad about them, because she is still their mum regardless. And you can be supportive without putting them down. He broke in the house was sick. Oh my God, that must have been terrifying, Arlene. Oh God, honestly, they do think they own the place. They think they own everything, and so to them that's perfectly normal. It's my house. I can do what I like. You're my wife. I can do whatever I like. I own you, essentially. I own you. I can do whatever I want. Court awarded out with custody. My visiting rights are based on amicable agreements. Right. Yeah, I'm sorry. I'm guessing you're male. I'm guessing. It's shocking. I'm trying to work out a way of helping people to win, be more successful in parental alienation cases. So you had to hand them back in, I take it. If you left you, yeah, this is the thing. This is what they do. They believe that you are worthy of being punished, and they will absolutely take everything from you, because that's what they think you did. They think you took everything from them because you dared to leave, or you dared to end the relationship, or you dared to no longer adore them. That's it. Ultimately, you stopped adoring them and giving them all that attention, therefore you deserve to be punished. I'm sorry to hear that, Andrew. I'm sorry that she's wound up and angry, which I'm sure the narcissist will love and be very happy. Just help her to deal with her emotions. Give her places where she can express an angry pillow or something that she can punch. Just a way for her to deal with them. Yeah, they do think it's a loss of control. They also think that, yeah, they want that adoration. As far as they're concerned, if you look on a psychological level, a narcissist is desperate to have someone to regulate their emotions. They need someone to adore them, to give them all that adoration so that they feel less inadequate. But when you realize the truth, that they're not who they say they are, that they're liars, that they're manipulating, and that you don't love them, you take away that adoration, and then they have to punish you for that, because they either want you to go back to adoring them, or if you refuse to go back to adoring them, which you can't unsee what you've seen, then they will absolutely punish you by using everything they possibly can to hurt you. They will use money, they will use your friends, they'll use your family, they'll use intimidation, they'll use fear, they'll use violence, they'll use whatever they can just to make sure that you know that you're in the wrong. Essentially, you stopped adoring them, you're in the wrong. Yeah, I think changing the locks is quite commonplace. Not knowing where you live, not giving them new addresses is always a good one. And that's the scary thing, Lacey, is that it's ownership. As far as I'm concerned, as far as the narcissist is concerned, they own you. They own you. And they'll happily discard and move on to a new supply, but they will never forgive the lack of adoration and obedience from you, and so they'll make you punish for that. I think you need to find a better way for her to express her anger, Andrew. Maybe look up how to support someone with anger. You shouldn't be the pillow. I think that's terrifying. I think there's a horror movie in that, Arlene. I think if you wrote it down, it could easily become a hot. I don't think you'd see it. Sports Tube says, Narc is a new supply living with my kids. Do you think it's wise to open his eyes by sending a book on narcs? He wouldn't see it. Remember, he's still in that love bombing phase. He's still thinking that they're wonderful, they're the best thing, and you're the bad guy. She has told him that you're this awful, abusive person, and you're so abusive that you stole the children. That's why you can't see them. Is because you did all of this, you did all of that, and he's there. He believes it. He's hook, line, and sinker. So even if you sent him that book, they'd see it as a threat. They'd probably go to the police and have you done for harassment, because that's how crazy they are. So I wouldn't try and rescue him. I would just hope that in time he sees it, and hope that he's a good man. Hope he's a good man, and actually he's someone who can be a positive influence around your kids, which I know isn't a nice thing to hear, but I think that it's better that children have positive people around them regardless of who they are. Hi Jenny. I'm not surprised, Arlene. I would. It'd make my skin. Is making my skin crawl hearing about him. It's not always. It's not always about play therapy. It can. I mean, that's a really good way. But you can do that. You don't need to. You could. Play therapy is essentially just giving them toys and seeing how they interact, and you can judge their emotions because they transfer their emotions onto the toys, so you can see how they view relationships. But with regards to anger, they can look at cool down techniques. You can look at, like say, punch bags. You can look at trying to rip up a phone book. That's one good way. It expels a lot of energy. Doing something to tire them out, that's a good way to get rid of energy as well. Oh, that's a bit of a shame, isn't it? Right. So that's so odd. What has she gone? Has she gone for this guy then just to hurt you? I'd be worried about my kids. Is it known? Is he known to be a regular user? Is that something you can put a protection order in place around the kids? When you say, Arlene, when you say he abused my eldest, do you mean emotionally, which all narcissists abuse their kids emotionally, or do you mean physically or sexually? Because again, he'll be using the shame and guilt, because if however he's abused them, and this is what narcissists do, they instill shame and guilt into their victims. So they will tell them that it's their secret. They will tell them that no one would believe them. They'll tell them, if you tell anyone, this horrendous consequence will happen and it will all be your fault. If you tell your mum, then the whole family will be ripped apart. I'll get killed or something awful, and they'll put it all onto the child so that they do. And she'll have withdrawn from you because she's scared. She's scared of sharing that. She's scared of feeling that way. She doesn't want to deal with it. And that it's a strong trauma bond. Sexual abuse is one of the strongest trauma bonds going. It's why kids don't disclose parental and familial abuse for many, many, many years, because it's so horrendous. The bond, though, is that fear, and they probably feel quite loved as well. It's very hard. But the trauma bond involved around sex is it's very intense. Because it's that it's not intimacy as we see it, but it's that it's like how or not will be showing their love. So she doesn't want to lose that, and so she maintains that bond. It's very, very dark, but it does happen in narcissistic relationships with their kids. Ward for the kids is married but separated. What seems like another narc. I think that's why he turned to LSD and he attempted to expose them. Just about that. And this is a difficulty. Well, he may see if he's left a narcissist already. Obviously, your ex will be love bombing and being wonderful and all of those things. So he's under her spell at the moment, but he may come around. He may see, and I mean he takes LSD to escape. He may still be a decent person around the kids. It's very hard. It's horrible. It's horrible to sit by and watch and know that, say, every service that is in place to protect is just letting these kids down and leaving them. And nothing you do, there's nothing you can do. There is nothing you can do because they believe them. Until we're at a place where people understand and we have solicitors and judges and social workers that absolutely 100% get the whole picture, then more children are going to be left in this way. Jenny, that's terrible. At 2.5, I would hope that she's got a very limited memory of that. Yeah, and this is the point when you think about it. You think, imagine your first sexual experience was with your parent. How do you tell a future sexual partner that? How do you tell your first boyfriend the first time it happened was with my mum or with my dad? That's horrendous. And so, yeah, you are going to want to bury your head and you are going to want to keep it a secret. And it's awful. It's disgusting. Absolutely disgusting. But what happens as well is that they end up feeling dirty and that they're to blame. So they kind of feel they have to forgive the person that did it to them. So she stays in touch with her dad because that in some way that makes her feel less dirty, if that makes sense. It is very twisted. Yeah, they won't talk about it. They're not going to acknowledge that they've done anything wrong. They never will. They never will. Yeah. And you'd think judges would just uphold the law, and where you'd be able to demonstrate where they've broken the law, and they'd want to see proof and evidence. That's how we're taught. That's how we're taught the law works. That a claim is made, evidence is found to support or not support, and then a verdict is made. Unfortunately, in family court, that's quite different, and that there does need to be reform. I'm just not sure exactly how that happens. Oh, I'm so sorry, Andrew. That's horrible. But she's 13, and I'm hoping that she's very, very soon. She will just say she doesn't want to go. She doesn't want to go anymore. And I know that's hard because she's got a sister there, and this is what's so difficult. But maybe they'll get to a point where she can meet up with a sister on her own without her mum being there. It is very scary, and this is the real concern with parental alienation, is that when children are left alone with abusive parents, that those sexual boundaries can be breached, can absolutely be walked all over, be ignored, and the narcissist will sexually abuse their own children because to them they're an object. They're literally just an object. They're a regulatory object to make them feel better. That's what they are. They're like a thermostat, essentially. It's horrendous. Yeah, it's very hard. It's very hard, and I mean, it's difficult. I mean, you say you stayed, and I can understand your reasons. There's no right or wrong. You leave, you risk losing custody and leaving them with them full time, and then them having them on their own. You stay, and the child witnesses a very unhappy, miserable relationship. So there is no win. Yeah, and I mean, I don't know. It's really difficult, but I think at 13, if she doesn't want to go, she doesn't want to go. It's got to be her choice. If she's vocal enough to say that herself and tell other people that she doesn't want to go and give good reason, that is her choice. It does have to be hers. I think you should write your story, Arlene. I think it's shocking and terrifying, and you start with a chronology. Just start there and then flesh it out, and I'm sure you could find someone. Publisher. Yeah, it's hard. It is hard. It's very hard. There's no answer, Andrew. I can't say one way or the other. It's your family. But at 13, if she doesn't want to go, she doesn't want to go. Don't take her. You don't have to put her in the car. You don't have to drive her there. If her mum's that desperate to see her, she'll drive down, but she won't. Yeah, I understand, Jenny. I do understand. I'm just saying it's a no-win situation for children of narcissists, because they stay, and if you stay, they're witnessing an abusive relationship, which teaches them that relationships are all about abuse. So may get into abusive relationships when they grow up. You leave, and you risk them having one-on-one time with them and being abused. So it's a ridiculous place to be. I think any of you that can write down your experiences, you'd find it very therapeutic. I write a lot. I write letters to people with things I want to say. They don't get sent, but I write them because it helps me to get it out my head, because I find I can't sleep, I can't switch off if it's still in my head. So writing is very therapeutic. Even if you never do anything with it, it helps you. And this is why in any of my sort of therapy sessions, I always would talk about the value of writing and the value of doing things. And this is the thing, a lot of people think that just because you're not arguing, that's not an abusive environment, but it is. It's still very abusive, and it's still sending a very clear message to a child, and they blame themselves. They absolutely blame themselves. So what is that message is that sending to your child? That when they tell the truth, they get accused of lying. So they're not gonna tell the truth again, are they? They're not gonna. And this is the lesson. This is what services don't understand, is we're sending this message, and people automatically think that people will go one other way. People will either automatically always believe everything a child says, and therefore when they say I don't want to see them, they'll remove, or they'll do what they do in your case. That wouldn't have happened. They must be lying, so therefore it can't be true. Either way, we're not supporting children, and we need more work done with kids. We need that one-on-one work with kids over months, rather than a 15-minute conversation with a Kafkas officer in front of the abuser that isn't going to get, they're not going to feel confident to say what they want. They're not going to really get to know them. They're not going to see how they are in different situations. More work does need to be done with children. We are coming up to the last 5 minutes, so if you've got any more questions, do post them and I will try and cover them and we can discuss them. Yeah, they do. They sulk or they rage. That's what they do. That's narcissist behaviour. And that in itself is abusive. That up and down, up and down, up and down. You don't know. You never know what's coming. You never know how they're going to respond. But it's abuse, regardless whether it's silent treatment or shouting. It's abuse because they don't know how else to behave. This is just who they are. They can't have a normal conversation. They can't discuss something. They can't communicate their feelings. They can't communicate that they're upset about something. They rage or they sulk. And they're not capable of having those normal adult discussions because they've not been taught it. They don't know how to self-regulate. Their neural pathways in their brain haven't formed to self-regulate because their parents didn't help them. So they literally don't have the pathways in their brain to get back to a normal status. They can't do it. This is why they react the way that they do. Scary. Very scary. But like I say, if you had someone who worked with the kids for longer, they'd share those things. They'd talk about what they'd seen. But they like I say, they see them for maybe 15 minutes, half an hour, and that's it. It's not long enough. We were always taught this. It takes time to build relationships. It takes time to build trust with children. It's unfair to expect them to just immediately trust you and tell you everything. It takes time. So get to know them. And when they do tell you something, take your time. Take your time, get them to explain what else goes on around it. What else? When did it happen? What did they see? Yeah, they don't like independent thinking. Even though they'll always say that, oh no, the child doesn't want to see them. The child doesn't want to see them. I've had no influence whatsoever. They've made this decision themselves. Rubbish. They don't want anyone thinking independently, because if they think independently, they might leave them. They may leave them, and that might expose them for the real inadequacies. Very scary people. Okay, last couple of minutes. Anything else? I'm more than happy. Now I'm going to wrap it up. I think, in summary, narcissists are like this 100% of the time. This is their character. It's a personality disorder. It doesn't go on and off. Even though they love bomb, ultimately their personality is static. However, your behaviour is responsive. So if you found yourself doing some things that may be seen to be narcissistic, and like I say, I know I've done things myself, it's not your character. It's a situational behaviour. It is not who you are all the time. And that's what's so important for you all to remember, is that just because you may on one or two occasions act a little bit narcissistic, that does not make you a narcissist. A narcissist is someone who has severe personality disorder, and they're like this 100% of the time. Yes, top quality. They're very cowardly indeed. They will always project. They will blame children. Something goes wrong. I know in my situation, child hurts himself. It's the kid's fault. You're welcome. Thank you so much for being here. Really appreciate it. I'll see you next week, and we'll try and, If you want to send me any recommendations of something you'd like to cover, please do. You can obviously, once this goes up, you can comment on that, or you can get in touch with me on any other of my social media channels. But thank you so much for being here. I hope you've enjoyed it. I've enjoyed being here with you. Enjoy the rest of your Sunday evening. Take care, everyone. Bye.